Well, it's been a wild ride for Jamie's start of the week this season, kind of like the teacups ride at Disney World, where Jamie...
Cut off my wife?
Jamie got engaged at Disney World.
Married, and engaged.
And got married.
Yep.
I was there for the wedding.
And conceived
Great
each
wedding.
one of his kids at Disney World in Florida. Start of the week roller coaster. Look at the first 5 weeks, averaging over 30 points a game, and then the last few up and down. Last week, uptick once again. Derek Carr, 20 points. So, Jamie, Mr. Disney, what say you this week?
Says I'm going to HR after the show. Now time for the Easy Choice, presented by Geico. As we get to the start of the week for week number 10, I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. We're going to help you with your fantasy lineups for an important week as the fantasy playoffs are getting close, trade deadlines are getting closer, and you got to make sure those lineups are right. We're going to help you with some of those decisions.
Did you notice that they had 1 dot for weeks 1 through 5? Like, they didn't give you credit for the first 5 weeks of the season, which were outstanding. 1 dot for the first 5 weeks of the season.
1 dot. That's,
1 dot. That's all the first 5 weeks are worth. What have you done for me lately?
Yeah,
what are you going to do this week?
Exactly right. Let's get to that. Start with the start of the week here for week number 10, and it's a running back who's been producing pretty well lately, but I think he's going to have one of his best games of the season. That's Ramondre Stevenson as the Patriots head overseas to take on the Colts. He scored at least 14.5 PPR points in 3 of his last 4 games, but the thing I like the most is, Dave, he's been involved in the passing game once again. 3 of those 4 games with at least 6 targets. Last week we saw no Kendrick Bourne for the first time. He's out for the season with a torn ACL. And this is a great matchup against the Colts. We talked about this a few weeks ago, the first time that Grover Stewart was missing against Jerome Ford and the Browns, when Ford was the start of the week. And he delivered with a big game for Cleveland. I think Stevenson will follow suit. Zaire Franklin is going to play for the Colts, so that could be a problem. But really, it's been bad news for the Colts all season long. But in the absence of Grover Stewart, 3 of 4 games, 3 games, 3 running backs over that span, 15.1 PPR points or more. I think Stevenson, as you see here, has top 10 upside. You share the same sentiment because you have him as the #1 running back as well.
I don't share top 10 upside because I have him 11th. Top 11 upside, we'll call it. I think he can be fine. I think the Patriots offense has to cling to him because they're really not good at doing much of anything else. And this Colts defense, they've actually gotten better against the pass as the season's gone on. So it makes perfect sense for them to lean on Ramondre Stevenson. He's been getting about 2/3 of the snaps this season. Certainly can score a touchdown in this game. And you know that those overseas games, they haven't always been pretty. So if this is going to be another unpretty game, that means that the run games for both teams will get going. I think Stevenson does just fine.
Lean on Stevenson. That's the message for the Patriots, and hopefully fantasy managers will benefit with a big game from him. Some other starts for me for week number 10 as we take a look at the guys that we're hoping to do well for your lineups. DJ Moore's got a game tonight, so looking forward to seeing how he does in a revenge game against Carolina. Sam Howell should keep it going against the Seahawks. Javonte Williams on Monday night against the Bills, and Drake London coming back from injury as well. You got Taysom Hill, who's just been fantastic for fantasy managers. But let's talk about DJ Moore because they play tonight. The Bears do against the Panthers, and I always love the revenge game narrative, Dave. So Moore spent the first part of his career in Carolina, was traded this offseason as part of the package to get the #1 overall pick. And he needs a big game. The last 3 games have been a little bit of a struggle for him with Tyson Bagent, but #1 receivers against the Panthers have been absolutely awesome. I think we're going to see him get featured some more as they'll try to give him every opportunity to score against his former team. So I like the setup for him as a top 20 wide receiver. Same thing for Drake London, who is coming back after missing last week's game with a groin injury. And it was disappointing not to have him out there for the Falcons because first game with Taylor Heineke. And now he gets a chance to play with Heineke. Hopefully he's 100% healthy. This Arizona defense not going to slow him down. So I like the setup for him as a top 20 wide receiver as well. I think this game will actually get a little loose, as our buddy Pete Prisco likes to say, because Kyler Murray's coming back. So we could see these 2 quarterbacks in terms of Heineke and Kyler Murray going head-to-head and having a big performance. Dave, what's your concern about Drake London this week?
It's Heineke. I know that he had a great ADOT last week, higher than it ever was with Desmond Ridder, but he was off target on over 20% of his throws, and we know that the Falcons, don't you have trust issues with the Falcons?
No.
You really?
Not with.
Are you
not
related to
with
Arthur Smith?
If I was, I probably would be rich.
You probably would. You'd at least have a great FedEx account. But the bottom line is this. I'm worried about them spreading the ball around too much, being too cute. I like him as a flex, just don't like him as a top 24 receiver. I think it's too risky.
You say spreading the ball around. That was not the case prior to him getting hurt. He was getting 7+ targets on a regular basis. I do think they will go back to that because, again, I think we'll see a game that's getting back and forth between the Cardinals and the Falcons with the return of Kyler Murray. Taysom Hill, Dave, we just got to the point now where he is a must-start fantasy tight end because he's not producing like a traditional tight end, but he is producing with 4 games in a row of at least 12.5 PPR points.
How about 4 receptions in 3 of his past 4 games? And that includes last week when he ran just 13 routes. So whatever they're doing in New Orleans, you know, I hate to say this, but I kind of want to see more of it. Let him loose as a pass catcher a little bit more. And then if you want to go ahead and have him steal touchdowns away from Alvin Kamara, I'll hate you for it, Dennis Allen. But I get it. The fact that he is a touchdown needy type of tight end just puts him in the same range as pretty much any tight end ranked 10 through 20. But the fact that he gets so many high value opportunities in that Saints offense makes me encouraged to get him. The 4 catches encourage me to start him. I don't mind him this week as a top 10 tight end.
20 carries, 115 yards, and 2 touchdowns the last 2 games against the Colts and the Bears, and we think that he'll continue to have that role, which is, as Dave alluded to, coming at the detriment of Alvin Kamara at the goal line. Starts for you for Week 10, Dave, as we take a look at the guys that you're looking to highlight here. Josh Dobbs at the top of the list as the quarterback gets some more prep time to understand the offense against the Saints. Najee Harris, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, and Dalton Schultz. A little theme here of some guys who have been struggling, certainly in Najee Harris and Calvin Ridley for the majority of the season, but you like them with their respective matchups. Let's talk about Josh Dobbs, because came on last week. 4th time this season, he finished with over 27 fantasy points, but it is a little bit of a step up in competition against the Saints. You still think he'll be a top 10, if not higher, quarterback?
I think he can do it. The dude had 28 fantasy points in 3 quarters last week, playing with guys he'd never throw to, and with a backup left tackle. It was just a crazy situation. And the rushing production, a huge part of that. He scored a rushing touchdown on top of 2 passes that he threw. The Saints are statistically better against the run than they are the pass, and it's going to make it hard for the Vikings to actually run the ball with Alexander Mattison. Big shocker. He's been inefficient all season long. And plenty of fantasy managers will have issues with how he played in Arizona. But that was in an offense with a worse offensive line, a worse play caller, a worse receiving core, and a good run game when James Conner is healthy. It's the exact opposite this time in Minnesota. I think he's got a shot to be a top 10 quarterback this week. Over 20 fantasy points. I think he does great.
I'm with you. I think it's going to be fun to see how he does, and could be even better as the season goes on once Justin Jefferson does return. Let's go to Jacksonville now with one of the games of the week between the 49ers and the Jaguars, and you like 2 receivers in this game, Deebo Samuel and Calvin Ridley. Is Deebo back to being a must-start receiver, knowing that it's been a very up-and-down season with him, and he is coming back after missing the past 2 games with a shoulder injury? And
the bye week as well. I think he's healthy and ready to go. He's full go in practice on Wednesday, so I'm expecting Deebo Samuel to be back to his old yards after catch self. 7+ touches in the game. We know he's not going to make a lot of big plays through the air, meaning a lot of deep throws from Brock Purdy. It's short throws. His ADOT's low, but he makes plays after the catch. He can always run for a touchdown or catch a touchdown. I think Deebo Samuel could have a good game against the Jaguars defense that plays a lot of zone coverage. That's usually when he's involved more in the 49ers offense, when they play against that type of coverage.
Which 49ers receiver do you like better, Ayuk or Deebo?
I do think Ayuk has a little bit more upside, and I feel safer starting Ayuk, but they're ranked. I think they're back-to-back in my rankings, Jamie. I like them both a lot this week. I like Brock Purdy, too.
And do you like the 49ers guys better than the Jaguars guys? We could also factor in Christian Kirk just to help fantasy managers looking at this game. Talk about Calvin Ridley, though, and then just, you know, give a taste of what Christian Kirk could do.
Sure. I do like the 49ers wide receivers more than the Jaguars wide receivers. I like Brock Purdy more than Trevor Lawrence. And I do think that Calvin Ridley, when you look at his best games this year, they've come when Trevor Lawrence has been pressured. And the 49ers should bring a lot of pressure. Not only do they have Nick Bosa, they traded for Chase Young. Those two are going to be coming at opposite ends against Trevor Lawrence. But that offensive line does a good job picking up pressure. He's been clean for most of the year. And I think Calvin Ridley could get some deep shots downfield because of it. I don't mind starting him as a low-end number 2 wide receiver. I like him better than Kirk in non-PPR, but I like Kirk better in full PPR. Very close between those two.
Kirk has just been more consistent. I would take Kirk. Ridley's my least favorite receiver of the 4 main ones in this game.
In
but
PPR, I agree.
All 4 are number 2 wide receivers, mostly because of the week that we're looking at here with 4 teams on bye. Remember, no Eagles, no Dolphins, no Rams, and no Chiefs, the big team there. Let's move to the sits and the guys we're looking to avoid this week. Dave, will stick with you. Jerome Ford is on this list as a running back you're looking to stay away from. Amari Cooper, you're just not going to Cleveland this week. No George Pickens, no Jacoby Myers, no Kyle Pitts. Jerome Ford, tough matchup. Amari Cooper, tough matchup, both taking on the Ravens. Is there anybody in Cleveland that you would trust?
The DST, I would roll with them this week just so I don't have to drop them or carry 2 DSTs. So them. That's it. Cooper's a flex. I mean, that's really about all that I like Cooper for. His numbers were inflated by the tip touchdown catch last week. His numbers weren't great. Watson didn't look great. Now he's taking on a Ravens team. Only 2 wide receivers all year have had 90 or more yards, and they needed double-digit targets to get there. Only 3 wide receivers all year have had 15-plus PPR points. I think it's going to be pretty easy for the Ravens to try and take away Amari Cooper while still pressuring Deshaun Watson. This could be another runaway win for the Ravens.
And in terms of Ford, is he flex as well, or is he just somebody that's not right?
You can flex Jerome Ford. I like him better in PPR than non-PPR, but you saw what the Ravens did to the Seahawks last week. I mean, that run offense is supposed to be something that they build everything on, and they couldn't get a darn thing going. Only 3 running backs all year have had at least 10 non-PPR points against them. 5 have had 10+ in full PPR. I just don't like Ford's chances to be much better than that. So high-end flex in PPR, really not a top 24 running back for me in any format.
Yep, tough to trust. And in that same game, one of my sits as well is Gus Edwards, as we show you the guys I'm looking to avoid for week number 10. Headlined by Davante Adams, who for the most part has been a huge disappointment. We'll talk about that in a second. But no Trevor Lawrence for me if you can avoid it. Same with Edwards, Adams, Zay Flowers. Tough matchup on the other side of the ball for Baltimore. He's just not getting the job done consistently. And then David Njoku, as you see, we don't really love a lot of the Browns for week number 10. In terms of Davante Adams, Dave, it's been a bust of a season for him. He has not scored a touchdown since week 3. He's gotten 8.5 PPR points or less in 4 of his last 5 games. And now he's taking on the team that allows the fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. It's not just Sauce Gardner. DJ Reed is doing a great job as well. I think it's going to be a tough game for Aiden O'Connell to throw the ball. You obviously still trust Davante Adams, so you're on the other side of the ledger here comparatively to the rest of us.
He's moved down in my rankings, but I'm still ahead of where you guys have Davante Adams because he's talented, because I think the Raiders are going to have to throw a little bit in this game. I think Aiden O'Connell's a little bit better than he deserves the blame for, because last week they didn't have to throw that much. There were 2 drop passes, both by Jacoby Myers. He should have had a better game. I think Davante Adams could have had more targets if it were a more competitive game. There is that concern that this game could be uncompetitive. Is that a word? We just made it a word. Again, this week where the Raiders build a lead and then they lean on the run and the Jets just can't put up any points. That's if the Raiders defense comes to play. If that happens, then you have Adams ranked correctly and I do not.
I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair across the board. Both these defenses playing well, mostly because both these offenses are not playing well, and I think Adams will once again continue his track record of another bad game. Trevor Lawrence has not been a good fantasy quarterback this season. You know, Dave, you said you like Brock Purdy better. I do as well. Lawrence has 2 games over 20 fantasy points. His high is under 22 fantasy points, so 21.5, his best game so far this season. And you're talking about the 49ers getting better with the addition of Chase Young. So it's really weird because I think Purdy will be okay. I think Lawrence will be okay. But we like the receivers. We like the tight ends. We like the running backs. Feels like it's going to be a low-scoring affair. We saw the Chiefs and Jaguars play a low-scoring affair. Feels like a similar game could be coming between these 2 teams. So I expect Lawrence to once again be under 20 fantasy points. And then really quickly, just to wrap up, Gus Edwards, he's been awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Over 17 PPR points each of the last 3 weeks with 6 touchdowns over that span. But he's taking on a Browns defense that is amazing. And I think he's going to struggle like Jerome Ford. So it feels like while it could be a great game from just watching it, how these 2 teams sort of play against each other, not a lot of fantasy points coming because these 2 defenses are very good. All right, there's your starts and sits for week number 10. Please make sure you're checking out our Fantasy Football Today podcast. We give you more starts and sits on Thursdays and Fridays. So today we went through the AFC home games. On Friday, we go through the NFC home games. But we podcast all throughout the week to help your fantasy lineups, making sure they are set to go 100% beautiful and fantastic, because that's what we do, the Fantasy Football Today podcast, wherever podcasts are found.